It has been a while since we did multigrain, so it's been a while since I had this info in my brain memorized. But we're making multigrain all week this week and actually doing something that we haven't done a whole lot of in the past, and that's sort of trickling the production out for delivery over the next couple days. So I'm deciding how far ahead I want to get in this preparation here. So what we're going to do is soak grains now all day long, and then they'll be mixed later on today. So yesterday we milled one grain in particular. The rest of the grains that we're going to put into the multigrain are already in a prepared state, so they can go straight in the soaker. And the soaker is meant to soften up the grains. I think I mentioned this in the milling segment, but if you've ever had a grain salad, it's a similar process where you soak them, hydrate them, make them nice and soft, and then they're basically edible in that form. But they're going to go through the whole dough production cycle then, because they'll be inserted into the dough, folded in, similar to how we do other things like fruits and nuts or olives or whatever it is that we want to put in bread. And then you're getting this whole grain base sourdough with the inclusion of a bunch of additional grains and seeds. So this particular one is going to have the purple barley. It's going to have quinoa. We're going to put flax seed, and we're going to put sunflower seeds, and we'll see how that turns out. So I'm going to make a double batch of this. So I need a total of 8,000 grains, 8,000 grams of grains. Now, with that said, that's going to be 4 different things in here at 2,000 each. So that's our measurement. Here's the purple barley that we milled yesterday. I'm going to grab quinoa from the shelf. Glad to be back in the pantry for something. We need flax seed, which is in this bin, and we need sunflower seeds. So all soakers need water as well. For this particular one, and by the way, getting into multigrain, this has actually been a bread that I would love opinions on. So use the comment section. If you are a baker, especially that has dealt with multigrains, I have some questions. One, what is your favorite mix of grains? Because if you go into a lot of the bread books, I've seen actually the most experienced bakers do things like say, put whatever grains you want. What I'm looking for is, has anybody actually tested different grains together to make really awesome flavor combinations? Because once we add a ton of different grains together, it all sort of tastes the same. It's that like everything grain, the 9 grain, whatever. What I'm wondering is, has anybody come up with 3 or 4 or 5 different grains in pairing that bring out really incredible flavors in the final bread? If so, share your opinions, because I'd like to try them. We've never, I think, tried this exact blend before, and part of it is we're kind of in a season finale mode, so my incentive is to use the grains that we have so that we can get a fresh set for next year. So I need to put half the amount of water as total grains. So we're going to be looking at 4 liters of water. I'll go ahead and grab that. It's not going to be very temperature sensitive, because the temperature will sort of even out throughout the day based on what the temperature in the bakery is right now. So we'll just fill up 4 liters of water here. And this will be the first time that I'm just going to let this 4-liter measurement on this be sufficient. Somebody was asking why I don't just fill up my buckets to the liter amount, and I think there's just some degree of paranoia there from the early days where 5 or 6 grams seem to matter greatly, at least to my mental sanity, in the pursuit of getting things right. So let's see if 4 liters is truly 4 liters. Well, now I think I might have some ammo here. So I put 4 liters according to this line, and I got 3.85 liters. Now, maybe 150 milliliters isn't important to some, but for me, that starts to get into my margin of paranoia. So my trusted scale wins again to the volumetric measurements. Those of you still using teaspoons and tablespoons and cups and quarter teaspoons, just get a digital scale already. All right, so I forgot about another annoying thing, and this lends itself really well to the story of the past. So you can see this giant bin sitting on this small scale. These scales actually cost a reasonable amount online. Like if you go on Amazon and look for digital scales, these won't break your bank, but this one over here will. The main difference between these two digital scales is they're both accurate to a very small amount. I believe that one's accurate to 2 grams. This one's accurate to the gram. This one's not very expensive. This one's like $400. What makes a scale worth $400? That you can put a lot of weight on it. So right now, this scale has 4 liters of water, and I'm about to try to put 8 kilograms of grains. The problem is this scale only goes to 8 kilograms, and this used to be our world. So we used to have this small scale and giant mixes, and so we would literally mix up to 8 kilos and then set it aside and get another vessel. So I'm going to show you what we used to do. So I am now going to set the bin on the table and not scale directly into it. Instead, I'm going to grab a dry bucket and scale incrementally. So really, I mean, all jokes aside, you can't afford a $400 scale if you can't afford a $400 scale. We certainly had a large period of time where it was not practical or wise to spend $400 on a digital scale. So there was a period of time where the inconvenience of doing this made a lot of sense. That inconvenience is no longer here, but while it was, we did what we had to do. So, you know, if you have to measure things a few more times, and that's the price that you pay to not break your own bank account on something you truly can't afford yet, trust me, the days of a high capacity scale will come. And there will also be moments in those days where you will have wished that you could go backwards to a time where you could use a small scale for your doughs. Because now that scale is insufficient for things. So, you know, there is a blessing in those moments. I often say that there's always something that you're reaching for. And if you're reaching for that high capacity scale, that's great. You know, you get to the point that you're reaching for bigger pieces of equipment, and that like mental anxiety of not being able to get what you feel like you need today doesn't really change as you scale up. In fact, it sort of intensifies because now all of a sudden you have more pressure to produce higher volumes, and those pieces of equipment that are even further out of reach, it's almost like you feel like you can't live without them. But those are the moments where I just encourage people to dig in, dig deep, and just keep pressing along. You'll get to the point that you can afford those things, and if you patiently wait, you'll be able to actually capitalize on those things instead of being indebted to someone for them. Don't get me the wrong way. I think there is a time and place to take on debt in your business. And you can certainly use debt wisely. We certainly have. We've opted a lot for short-term financing ourselves. Sometimes that short-term financing comes at higher percentage rates, but you get flexibility in your payment terms. For instance, we've used Square Capital in the past. When we needed a capital injection for a project really quickly, you can get funding in a couple days. and then they take a percentage of your card sales that you run through Square. So what's nice is if you go through a period where you're not selling as much, well, that percentage drops along with. But we found that we could pay those loans back really quickly. And so those had a really good time and place. I'm getting close to the end of my measurement here, so I'm going to get back to this soaker segment. We now have the 8,000 grams of grains. I measured them. I basically did 3 separate measurements on this scale. With a high capacity scale, I could do 1 measurement of the water and the grains. I could save a little bit of time. So it's really fine though without it. Time is important and it's valuable, but it's the one thing that you can sort of be self-sacrificial about as you're building your bakery business. I don't think that there's really ever been a business that's been bootstrapped where the owners didn't have to sacrifice their time, or yet oftentimes people have this discussion of valuing themselves and valuing their own time. And, you know, I find that to be a good discussion to have. Certainly, I think that as business owners, we should think about that. But I think that sometimes people have those discussions a little too early in their endeavors, where they're a little too eager to rest and a little too eager to step back. And the thing is, I don't think anything worthwhile is built very quickly or overnight. And in that building process, until your business has everything that it needs to maintain, I think that you've got to dig deep, either into your pockets for money that you've saved or into your time. It's one of two. You either have deep pockets and you can pay for everything that you need to build your business, or you have the ability to put in your time and earn those things through your own sweat equity. So, you know, when it comes to situations where you can't afford a piece of equipment that's going to save your time, yes, it's important to save time where you can, but it's also important not to strap your business with too much on the overhead just because you don't feel like doing something for a little bit extra. Consider spending time saving up for things that are truly unnecessary and instead financing the things that are truly pressing to you right now. So for me, in proof, my wish right now would be a water doser. I would love it if I could hook up a water doser to my water lines and streamline the measurement, because right now we do 4 or 5 buckets of measurement separately just because I can't lift reliably 70 pounds of water at a time. So we have to measure it into several segments, and I could save maybe 30 minutes a day in labor by having a water doser. But right now that is not a priority. I don't need a water doser, and so I'll live with the extra measurements that are required to measure out water. So that's what I mean by those type of things scale up. Identify the things that are really critical and finance those. Whereas the things that are truly just wishes, save up for them. There will be a time where you can afford them. So going back to these grains, I've now measured them out and I just soaked them in the sense of the water was all on the bottom. And so I just kind of scooped the bottom out and mix in this type of a fashion until all of the grains are wet. I also use this opportunity to sort of mix them all up so that this is now just one mix of grains instead of 4 separate grains in water. Keep in mind though that these all have different weights, and when they are layered like this, if you leave this soak for any period of time, you can't just reliably scoop and get an even mix. Some of them are going to settle, whereas others are not. So before you use these soaked grains later on, you'll want to come back in here and mix them back up before putting them into your doughs. if you're just using all this at once and putting it in a mixer, that's not really that critical. But for us, we're going to refrigerate these and use them over a 48-hour period. So I made enough for a couple days. That's all I have on this. The information on soaking grains that I've been able to find is too limited. I think we need a greater discussion out there amongst the baking community on what grains work, what flavor combinations work. Do you have other soaking techniques that we're missing? For us right now, this is just throw a bunch of grains, whatever we want, or seeds together, soak them, and then put them in bread. As a result, that's been sort of the intentionality of flavors in our multigrain bread. So from the very beginning, 3 years of making multigrain, I've tried different types of flavor combinations, and I can't say that I've ever really had any type of a knockout flavor profile. So help me out. What do you like?